For the next few minutes, let's walk through how mindfulness practice differs when the goal is recognized to facilitate a shift in view, rather than the typical 10 minutes of directing attention towards an object like the breath. I would even go as far as to say that these are two completely different practices, and the only similarity would be the act of paying attention. Because there's a huge difference between spending a few minutes trying to focus on the breath from an intuitive starting point somewhere on the edge of the conscious model, trying to be present, trying to calm the mind, trying to sustain a peaceful string of minutes, and instead turning attention towards where everything is happening, the medium itself, and facilitating a shift in experience, recognizing that what constitutes us is actually that of being that space, where, paradoxically, all of those characteristics, presence, calm, peace, are not things you chase. Rather, they're intrinsic to the shift itself. There's nothing more to do but be the flow of experience as the flow of experience. After the glimpse, what now? For anyone that has experienced that shift, what's the playbook? The rationale for mindfulness clearly changes from before. You've seen that there's a different path. It becomes clear that the goal of mindfulness is only to strengthen the skill of recognizing and resting as that shift. Sitting or walking becomes time spent facilitating the change in view, not spending the allotted time trying to focus attention on a specific object, such as the breath. As Sam Harris puts it, learning how to access the shift on demand. And until that naturally becomes more stable, a more familiar characteristic of the day, the playbook is to return to the cue or cues that facilitated that shift in view, over and over. Recognize and repeat. Spend the dedicated time focusing on those, creating the correct momentum above all other exercises. For some, that cue might be an audio from a specific mindfulness instructor. For others, it might be a specific characteristic, intrinsic to experience, one that becomes a kind of guide for attention to follow. And again, here's the paradox. Many traditional mindfulness cues, like focusing on the breath or honing in on body sensations, can actually reinforce the mind's contracted dualistic posture, because they subtly affirm the stance of, there's me, observing that. Those instructions can keep the sense of self localized, in a place commonly felt to be behind the eyes or in the head. This is the point Sam Harris raised in a recent conversation with Joseph Goldstein and Dan Harris. When the shift to non-dual awareness occurs, it's self-evident that a starting point of observing breath actually hamstrings the ability to facilitate the shift in view. Focusing on the breath or honing in on body sensations in some way promotes a subtle assumption that practice can progressively improve experience for a stressed subject, the one doing the practice. As Sam Harris states, an executive stress ball. Rather, by pointing attention in a totally different way, this other path points to the recognition and subsequent resting, making obvious that the experience of a cramped subject viewing this scene from a felt location behind the scene is the mindfulness path that is prone to continued suffering and frustration during the exercises. But by facilitating a shift to the medium where everything is flowing, the full field of experience, the context, then the exploration of all the objects of awareness included in the field can follow the shift. From my own practice, so far, I've found two types of cues that reliably facilitate the shift. The first, cues that point mindfulness toward the medium, the context or playing field of experience. The second, cues that help you reinspect that me sense on the edge of the field, the contracted self. I find both of these cues as two sides of the same coin. Let's look at the first. Cues like internal sound or energy, when followed closely, can reveal themselves to be woven throughout the visual field. They're not separated, they're not isolated. They can be seen as permeating throughout experience. Sam Harris, though he hasn't explicitly framed it this way, likely has found the experience of ringing in the ears useful in this exact fashion. Mindfulness, directed towards the experience of ringing in the ears, can reveal that, in fact, it isn't just ringing in an ear. It can be recognized as a texture of experience that's suffusing the field. Likewise, a cue that I found most reliable is directing attention towards residual morning sleepiness. When mindfulness follows this energy texture, it becomes clear that this phenomenon is not a head-based sensation. It can be followed into the visual field. It doesn't stay in the forehead or behind the eyes. It's woven into the mind's entire model of the moment. And when there's an initial posture of a subject on the edge of the visual field, the act of exploring that texture, following its presence throughout the conscious experience, the shift can occur naturally. Experience is no longer being observed from behind the face. It is simply being. There is only the field. The other common cue is this: look for what's looking. This directs attention toward the felt sense of self. For some, that instruction will create the circumstance where attention will kind of bounce off of the intuitive area in the conscious model. And when nothing specific can be found, just sensations in the head, a posture of looking, the moment becomes available for the shift. The felt center can dissolve, and experience can be recognized not from a center, but as the medium itself. A hang-up with the instruction to look for what's looking is that for many, even though the search paradoxically doesn't find anything of substance, there can be a sense that an observer is still, in some way, a witness to the process. The subtle sense persists, holding on to that cramped sense on the edge, and the possible shift in experience is not facilitated. Kind of like looking for your keys in the house. If you don't find them, there is the continued stance that they are still in the house, even if the search came back empty. That can be a hang-up with this cue. Different minds may resonate more with one cue than another, but the function of each is the same: to move experience away from the contraction and back toward the field, undoing the illusion of localization. And here's where it gets profound. These cues are often assumed to belong to a particular place: my head, my ear. But when you recognize they're present everywhere, even in parts of the visual field you once assumed were external, you start to see the illusion breaking down. Because if the sound or feeling is both out there and in here, then where exactly are you? The contracted edge of experience self can't hold. The boundary dissolves. So if this resonates, if you've had even a moment of this shift, here's the new approach to practice. Not striving to be calm, not focusing from the edge, but gently, curiously, exploring the entire field. Ask yourself, what is this whole thing appearing within? What is the texture of the field right now? Is there anything on this side of experience, a subject actually here? Then follow the cues. Let them carry you, not into concepts, but directly into the texture of being. And when the shift occurs, rest there. Let it become familiar. Let it stabilize. That's the final playbook. Thanks for exploring.